Hello and welcome back to Resilience Unravelled. And sitting in front of me is Darryl Stickel, and he's from, I believe, one of God's greatest countries. I believe it's called Canada. Is that right, Darryl?
Yes, the US hasn't taken us over yet. I'm living in Victoria, which is on Vancouver Island, just off the west coast.
Beautiful. What a wonderful part of the world. Right then, Darryl, tell us a little bit about you and your past and such.
I was born and raised in a small town in northern Canada, small and isolated, about an hour away from the next small town. It's a place called Fort St. John. And I grew up to parents my father was a welder, had a grade 8 education. My mother went to high school, but that was the limit of her educational exploits. And the place I grew up was harsh at times. The weather was pretty cold. And so you grew up with this sense that if you could help somebody, you should. Not to say that everyone was nice, but we all realized we had to pull together. And so it provoked a sense of empathy in me. And then when I was 17, I was playing hockey and I got attacked by a fan with a club. Shattered my helmet, knocked me unconscious. Apparently, I stopped breathing 3 times on the way to the hospital.
Wow.
And I I'm legally blind. I knew I was losing my eyesight. It's a degenerative retinal disorder.
All right.
And so my thought had been to train myself to think for a living. And now all of a sudden I've got the attention span of a fruit fly. I can't think. And so there was a long stretch of helplessness and hopelessness that had me feeling pretty dark.
Yeah.
And I tried to go back to school. I tried to go to college. It was an epic failure. And eventually I started to recover and I managed to get through an undergraduate degree and then a master's degree and then a PhD in business. But one of the things that really put me on the track that I'm on is the fact that people would come to me and they just start opening up. I'd be sitting
Mm.
on the bus and someone would sit next to me and say, I'm really having a hard time today. And I wanted to understand what it was that was causing people to feel so comfortable with me. And so I started down the path towards becoming a clinical psychologist. I did an undergraduate degree in psychology and was working with troubled teens and families in crisis and working on crisis lines and those kinds of things to hone those skills.
Mm.
And I realized that a lot of the people I was dealing with were just stuck. And it had taken them a long time to get there, and it was going to take them a long time to get out. And so I transitioned into public administration. I was working in native land claims in British Columbia. They would ask me these sort of deep philosophical questions like, what is self-government? Or what will the problems look like 50 years after claims are settled? And the last question they asked me was, how do we convince a group of people who've shafted for over 100 years they should trust us? That's a good question. And
It's
so
it's the question in a way, isn't it? Because actually most governments need to ask that question.
most governments, internally and externally,
Yeah.
and it got me thinking about these long-term disputes and why they're so resilient. Like they don't
Mm.
seem to help anyone, but we can't seem to get past them. And so I went to the business school at Duke, wrote my doctoral thesis on building trust in hostile environments, and just happened to have two of the world's leading academics on the topic of trust on my committee. And they sat me down after I was done and they said, when you first came to us, we thought too big, too complicated, he never solves it. And said, we'll give him 6 months. He'll come crawling back to us. We'll let him chisel off a little piece of that, and that'll be his thesis. They said, 6 months in, you were so far beyond us, we couldn't help anymore. All we could do was sit and watch.
That's
And here we
great.
are years later. We think you've solved it. And so I went to work for McKinsey and Company, big
Mm.
management consulting firm. And they said, wow, you've got great client hands. Let's send you to the worst places possible. And all this time I'm learning and applying the model that I've theorized about. And then I'm in a car accident on the way to a client site. I end up with post-concussion syndrome, and I just can't work those hours anymore.
Right.
And so I start up my own small company called Trust Unlimited. And one of my former colleagues comes to me and says, just come, I'm head of strategy for a mutual fund company. Just come talk to us. And so I start talking to them about sustainable competitive advantage, which basically means you do something better than your competitors and they can't copy it.
Yes.
And I said, you don't do anything I can't copy. You're a mutual fund company. You have to be transparent. If I wanted to, I could buy one share of every fund you have and just copy them because now I know how they're all built and I don't have to pay the
Yes.
fund advisors.
Yeah.
So I can sell what you sell at a discount. I said, the only thing you can do is build deep, long-term relationships with your customers. And they said, that's it. That's our strategy. And so for 18 months, I trained everybody. I developed a workshop. And after 18 months, they hired Ipsos Reid to do a survey, a professional survey firm. Found out that trust was the primary driver and that of the sales decision, and that they were dramatically more trusted than any of their competitors. And they generated 75 cents of every new dollar that came into the industry for the next 2 years.
Wow.
So from that, I knew what I have isn't perfect, but it works. And so I've devoted the rest of my life to helping people better understand what trust is, how it works, and most importantly, how to build it.
Okay, can we start there then? Because you've got a PhD, so you'll have spent many hours defining terms. So can we talk
Right.
about your definition of trust and what that is, and where it's based, where it's come from?
Yeah, that's a really good first question because we have this sort of lack of awareness. It feels fuzzy. So let's make it a little more concrete. Trust is the willingness to make yourself vulnerable when you can't completely predict how someone else is going to behave. And so that has elements of uncertainty and vulnerability embedded in it. And in fact, when we decide to trust someone, we ask ourselves two fundamental questions. How likely am I to be harmed, which is perceived uncertainty? And if I'm harmed, how bad is it going to hurt, which is
Right.
perceived vulnerability?
Yeah.
Those things multiply together to give us a level of perceived risk. And we each have a threshold of risk that we can tolerate. And if we go beyond that threshold, we don't trust. If we're beneath it, then we do. And so what that means, Russell, is that if uncertainty is really high, vulnerability has to be low for us to trust.
Yes.
And those are our shallow relationships.
Yeah.
As our relationships get deeper, the amount of uncertainty we're experiencing goes down. The range of vulnerability we can tolerate starts to grow.
Yes.
And so we can still fit.
Okay, I get that. So that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that definition. So can I ask again what seems like an obvious question, and forgive me for this, but
Yeah,
does trust start with ourselves? Do we need to learn to trust ourselves first before we can trust anybody else?
I think there's a correlation, but it's not one to one.
Okay.
We trust people without knowing them sometimes. We trust doctors. Trust is so embedded in a functioning society. When we go across the street, we trust people. We go to a restaurant, we trust people. We get in an airplane. We can't leave the house without some level of trust. And so one of the challenges with most of the literature is it treats trust like a dichotomous variable, like it's an old-time light switch, like it's present or absent. But the reality is we trust some people more than others.
Yeah.
And so we can have limited trust for ourselves, but still trust others to, to perform the tasks that we expect them to perform.
Yeah. So is the opposite of trust in your model, is it fear?
That's a good question. Yeah, I haven't thought of it that way, but it could well be.
So in a sense, what you're building in your risk model is a form of confidence and competence to be able to actually develop trust in a way. I know that those two thoughts don't lead on naturally from that, but that would make sense, wouldn't it? Because it taps into that body of literature around fear avoidance.
Yeah, and a lot of times we have this lack of awareness around trust. We'll get this feeling, we'll get
Mm.
uncomfortable. And part of the challenge we see is that when we get that feeling, we don't know why and we don't know how to make it go away. And so a lot of times we'll abandon a situation or just start to dig in and become convinced that we don't want to trust the
So,
other party.
so that's really fascinating, isn't it? So again, can I develop my logic because your model's so
Yeah.
clear, it's so lovely to understand. So you said earlier that actually some people we trust immediately, and maybe you know why. Now, let's come back to that in a minute. But I'm just wondering whether we tend to trust people who are like ourselves. So we tend to perpetuate that sort of in-group philosophy, and people who are our age or color or whatever it might be. That's is that the secret of trust in a sense at an innate level? Is that the human characteristic of spotting people like ourselves?
That's part of it. We can also see stereotypes of folks that we're comfortable with. Social learning plays a role where we've had experiences with people of certain types before. Let me expand on the model and help
Please do.
explain. So we've talked about uncertainty times vulnerability equals risk. Our perception of risk versus our threshold is the trust decision. That leads to a perceived outcome. And I use the word perceived very intentionally because we interpret the world through stories. And our perception of that outcome then feeds back into our next interaction with somebody else. In the middle of all this is our emotional states, whether we like or dislike someone else. 99% of the trust research treats people like rational actors. And Russell, I don't know if you've met people before, but we're not all rational.
No.
Definitely not all the time. And so that piece that you're talking about, that familiarity, that similarity piece, we tend to like people who are like us,
Mm,
and we like people who like us.
yeah.
And if we like someone, we're more inclined to look for reasons to trust them.
Yeah.
We're more likely to trust them, and we're more likely to view the outcomes as positive because we've got this positive story about them because they're like us. They must be good people.
Yeah.
And it can create these virtuous cycles because then we like them even more.
Yeah.
If we see someone who's not like us, we're more suspicious. We're less likely to like them. We may even dislike them because of stereotypes or history. Makes us look for reasons not to trust, less likely to trust. We have even more stringent perceptions of the outcome. Our definitions of success and failure get more narrowly defined, and it can lead to vicious cycles. And the problem is that 99% of the trust literature, because it doesn't include emotions, uses cognitive rational approaches to dealing with fundamentally emotional problems, and we
Mm,
fail.
yeah. But is it fair to say that the model you're describing there is almost a first impressions model? Because that what happens over the course of time, we learn whether that trust we give people is justified, and we learn with some other people that it was unjustified, and that's whether they are competent or have they do I earn our trust? Do they deliver what they say? All that sort of stuff. So you can often start by not trusting someone, but trust can be developed, isn't it? So it's a bit like a muscle or a skill set in a sense.
Trust, I think of trust as a living thing. It ebbs
Okay.
and flows.
Yeah.
And even in our deepest relationships, we can have bumps that provoke uncertainty, cause us to be a little less comfortable with someone. Oh, I didn't know that about you.
Mm,
Or we can have moments where somebody really comes through unexpectedly. Wow, we're closer than we were. So we develop better communication skills. So I don't think it's really a first impressions model. And one of the things that differentiates the work that I do, there's a few things. One is the inclusion of vulnerability, because it allows us to talk about relationships at different depths,
yeah.
as opposed to trust either being present or absent. Another is the perceived outcomes in this sort of feedback loop. And another element is context. And you were going to ask about why we trust some people when we don't know them. You go to a doctor's office, they say, take off your clothes, and you do, Russell. I've tried that in other places.
Yeah, it's
It,
tricky.
it doesn't work.
No.
You can get very different responses. And in fact, if we took the same two people and we had a vignette of a doctor walking into a doctor's office and saying, take off your clothes, and then we moved them from the doctor's office to a gas station restroom,
Yeah.
same people, same conversation, it goes from credible to creepy in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Context plays a huge role in reducing our uncertainty or provoking it. And it actually carries the majority of the freight early in the relationship. And when I was advising the Canadian military, trying to help them figure out how to build trust with the locals in Afghanistan, we came to realize that we in industrialized nations tend to rely heavily on formal mechanisms of social control.
Mm,
Rules, regulations, job descriptions, those all carry tremendous meaning for us. But in Afghanistan, it was all informal. It was, who are you related to? What religion are you?
Yes.
Who's the head man of your village? Who are your friends?
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think there are 10 levers that we can pull to build
Hmm.
trust. And we all have the ability to build trust. Some are just better than others. Those who aren't very good have a lever that they pull. Those who are better have multiple levers.
Right.
Those who are really good have multiple levers and they know when to pull which one.
Got me intrigued now about learning all the levers, but I'm not sure whether we've got time tonight. But it's so tempting. I hope you've written this all down in a book somewhere. But coming back to that point you just made there, that point about context, and I think that's really brilliant, and it makes a lot of sense because you think about this concept, something like emotional intelligence, which is self, others, and context.
Right.
I'm guessing there's something here about one's ability to have empathy, but also to actually display that empathy. Because, in other words, part of
Yeah.
displaying empathy is that ability to show that you're capable of being liked.
You're a really smart guy, Russell.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So a big part of this is people often think that they're pulling the levers. So uncertainty comes from me as an individual and from the context I'm embedded in. And for me as an individual, there are three levers we can pull. Those are benevolence, integrity, and ability. Benevolence is the belief you've got my best interest at heart,
Yeah,
that you'll act in my best interest. Integrity is, do I follow through on my promises and do my
yeah,
actions line up with my values? And ability is, do I have the competence to do what I say I'm going to do?
yeah,
And I'll walk through those with senior executives and they'll say, I do all those.
yeah,
And I'll say, says who?
yeah,
Because it doesn't matter if I think I'm doing those things, Russell. It matters if you think I'm doing those things.
yeah. And I
And
think you hit the
so
nail. Sorry to cut in there,
go
Darryl.
ahead.
I just thought that was a really interesting point there because that integrity thing, I think, is the bit that we, in leadership terms, often we'll work for an organization and they'll have a value sitting on the masthead.
Yeah.
It'll be honesty or something. And then you'll say to someone, oh, I need to do this thing. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. But don't tell that person around there. He said, and on a daily basis, the difference between
Yeah.
corporate trust and individual trust is got rid of because of this idea of integrity. And for me, this is really interesting because I counter that because I actually think that authenticity and integrity are often confused. And I think they're very different things. Just wonder what your thought is on that.
Yeah. And I struggle with the word authenticity because people often use it to mean accept me for being authentic, but I
Mm,
don't really give a crap about you being authentic unless I agree with you. Because the people who assaulted the Capitol in the US on January 6th were extremely authentic.
yeah,
Didn't make me trust them.
yeah,
And so a lot of times with these things, when we talk about integrity, it's what are the commitments I'm making? What are the commitments you think I'm making?
yeah,
And I might think I followed through on them, but we can miscommunicate. And because people interpret the world through stories, I may think that my actions line up with the values I've expressed. But boy, everyone else might have a different story than I do. And so I work hard with people to think about what are the commitments I'm making, both explicit and implied. And how do I tell the story that links my actions to the values that I've stated?
yeah.
Because otherwise, if I don't help people build that story, they're free to run around on their own and make up their own story.
And this is really important, isn't it? Because actually, you either say, and this is the back to this integrity thing, isn't it? You either say, look, I'll be situationally honest as much as I possibly can, or you'll say, I'll be honest all the time, and you will inevitably fail. But the other
Right.
one sounds sexy and lovely and leadershipy, and the other one just sounds like pragmatic common sense. And it's like the BS that's involved in the sexy one is pointless because it does eat away at trust, doesn't it? And I think integrity is the bedrock in terms of having trust for yourself as well. Is because if you can't look in a mirror at the end of the night and say to yourself, I did, this is who I am, this is what I said, this is what I was going to do, and this is how it worked. Unless you can do that, actually, you've got no right to start expecting things from other people.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my good friends is a guy named Tony Simons, who I think is the world's leading expert on behavioral integrity. And he did a fascinating study showing that just even small increases in perceived integrity led to significant improvements in bottom line performance for organizations. So just even getting that partially right leads people to be more comfortable. They become more engaged. They're willing to work harder. They're willing to do organizational citizenship behaviors. That's the corporate stuff. But in
Mm,
our lives,
mm,
it means that people are more willing to be open and honest with us. And what I try to do is help people close the gap between how much they should be trusted and how much they actually are.
yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? It's given me a lot to think about here. So unpack benevolence, being benevolent a little bit for me there as well, because I think
Yeah.
everybody understands the word integrity, whether they get a sense of that. But I wonder benevolence has a because it's got some odd connotations about benevolence. I'm just interested in what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. So a lot of times, and here's a conversation that your listeners can use. And we're talking about resilience. I think that our ability to build relationships gives us resilience.
Agreed.
It allows us to manage the world more healthily. We become less isolated. And when things go wrong, there's more people standing by to help. And so I talk about deepening relationships. And when I talk about benevolence, it's really about having someone's best interest at heart. And the story or the conversation that I'll give for your listeners is you start by saying, I heard this guy, Darryl, he was talking about trust. He said that benevolence is really important. And really, that just means having someone's back. And I think I do that, but it doesn't always seem to land that way. Have you ever experienced that? Overwhelmingly, the person you're talking to will say, yeah, that happens to me. You get curious about it, you dig into it. And then you narrow the funnel and you say, have you ever had somebody really have your back? What did they do? How did it feel? What did it look like? And now you're priming them and you're getting hints about what benevolence looks like to them. And then you narrow the funnel further and you say, what is success for you? How do I help you get there? What would it look if I had your best interest at heart? Now we've created the moment for transparency. And a lot of times people think, oh, we're going to sing kumbaya and we're all going to hold hands and we're just going to be nice to each other all the time. That's not always what benevolence means.
Mm.
My son just joined the military. And I told him before he went to basic training, I said, they're going to yell and they're going to hold you to a higher standard. And the entire aspiration is to help you survive.
Yeah.
Their goals and objectives are to turn you into the best soldier you can be, to improve your probability of survival, and to improve the probability of the survival of the guy next to you.
Yeah.
It's not going to feel like it, but it's going to be benevolence. And so going in with that mindset, he said, was profoundly helpful. And I had a student, we're sitting there, and I said, tell me a relationship that matters to you. And he said, my girlfriend. I said, all right, so what's most important to your girlfriend? He said, I think family. I said, all right, so tonight when you go home, you're going to have this conversation. You're going to say to her, I was in class today and the prof asked me to think about a relationship that really mattered.
Mm.
I said, you. I said, that's step one. You're showing her that you're thinking about her and that she matters to you. I said, then you're going to say, he asked me what was really important to you or most important to you. And I said, family. Is that right? Now you're inviting her into the conversation.
Yeah.
And she's got the opportunity to say yes or no.
Yeah.
When she says yes, you're going to follow up and say, then I assume that it matters to you that I get along well with your family.
Mm.
And so I'm going to start spending more time with them, trying to build a stronger relationship with them because it matters to you. The next day he came back, he had this huge grin on his face. He said, I'm allowed to talk to you whenever I want. So that went incredibly well.
And
And so,
the point you made earlier in that transaction between those two people is really interesting because at the point where you say, I assume X, that's a point of vulnerability, isn't it?
yeah,
Because that know you're wrong should give you some real pause to think that you know someone who's a partner as well as that, but you've got that element wrong. And people don't they make assumptions
they,
about people. They
we
pretend
absolutely
they
do.
don't ask.
Yeah. And so for me to understand what benevolence looks like to you, I have to include you in the conversation.
Yeah.
And that requires some vulnerability on my part, Russell. And you're bang on. People ask me, how do I build trust quickly? I make myself a little bit vulnerable first. So I initiate a norm of reciprocity. I go first so that you feel like it's safe for you to follow. And then I show you a bit of benevolence. I
Yeah.
actually get interested in you and how I can make your life better.
Yeah. Interesting. I must ask you about that. Now you said there was a third.
Lever?
Yes. Sorry,
ability.
you people in that part of the work use levers and routes and things, and we're levers and routes. Yeah. What was the third? It was ability, wasn't it? That's right. You
It
did say that.
is.
Yeah. So what do you mean
And
by that?
that's our favorite lever to build.
You're being very generous now. You're saying lever. You don't really don't have to.
I'm going to try to remember.
Don't worry.
And it's our favorite one to pull. I have this much experience, these kinds of credentials. I have a PhD from Duke. I spoke at Harvard. They
Yes.
said I was brilliant, blah, blah, blah. It's our favorite lever to pull, but we often don't include the other party in it. And so when I do workshops, I always start off by saying, what would make this an exceptional workshop? What would I need to do for the next hour for you to say, this is the best workshop I've been in? Or what would I need to do for the next 2 days?
Yeah.
And I'll write out a list and I'll get a feedback because it's one thing for me to think about what ability looks like. But if I wanted to be really good, I'd ask you
Mm.
what good looks like for your podcast. And I did ask you at the
You
start
did.
before we started filming.
Yeah.
And if I wanted to be really good, I'd ask your listeners.
Mm.
And we get feedback from them about what would be really compelling.
Mm.
And we often pull the ability lever, but we don't always pull it correctly.
Yeah. There's a contextual issue, isn't there?
There
And
is.
and that's where you go back to that point about context, isn't it? Because actually it's not possible to ask my listeners in time for this thing. But what you get is feedback for the next one, don't you?
Yeah.
The point is to ask in the first place.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in this. I'm slightly going off on a flight of fancy, so forgive me again. But I'm interested in the sort of modern idea of inclusion, which is this idea that we want many talents, therefore we have people who are very diverse, that have
Right.
real differences. In other words, so we tend to hire people who are like us and we like them and they like us. And I've always said, actually, you should always hire people you don't like, because actually what happens then is you'll either find something or you'll find that someone's thinking in a different way. And what you'll inevitably get is something called conflict. Now, by conflict, I use it with a small c. So, there's a difference between conflict, which is a manifestation of difference, and fighting with each other. That's a different sort of conflict.
Right.
So I'm just thinking, and of course, the trust building comes from the conflict. The trust building comes from the disagreement, doesn't it? So
Right.
it's that you can start without trust and end up with trust.
You can, not all the time.
No.
So again, it's like you're reading my mail, Russell, because I've been working on a project with a group of folks from Cornell, including Tony Simons, who I mentioned earlier, called the
Mm.
Golden Triangle. And it talks about what makes teams most effective. And diversity provides both benefits and challenges.
Yeah.
Because I've said that uncertainty makes it harder for us to trust, diversity provokes uncertainty.
Yeah.
And the way we get the good parts of diversity is through some level of disagreement or hard conversations or small c conflict.
Yeah.
But we only get that if we have trust.
Yeah.
And so it's a 3-step stool where we're talking about trust levels need to be high enough that people will actually bring their opinions to the table, those different ideas, and so that we'll accept them or at least hear them out. That's when we get the real juice from the
Mm.
squeeze with
Mm.
diverse teams. And that's teams that perform at peak efficiency.
Yeah. And I like what you're saying there, because you're not talking about diversity and inclusion as being some sort of tick box exercise. It is literally about having different human beings who challenge the status quo and your own levels of thinking. And that's where I come back to that idea of trusting yourself, because you've got to be sure in yourself to be able to have the benevolence and ability to be able to be comfortable with people who are different.
Yeah, so there's enough of a confidence in ourselves to make comments, to push back against ideas, to
Mm.
feel like we can say things in a way that won't provoke or offend. And partly that comes from experience. Partly that comes from our good intent. I'm going to go back again, Russell, to the fact that we interpret the world through stories.
Yeah.
And when it comes to my sons, I have a relentlessly positive story. And what I try to teach people that I coach and that I work with is start with a positive story about
Yeah.
others. Start with the belief that they have good intent.
Yeah.
because it'll mean that new information that comes to you is colored through that lens, and you'll give them the benefit of the doubt. And this is what trust really gives us. It gives us grace, and we could use a lot more of it.
Yeah. And what's interesting about, again, what you've said there is that trust isn't a trust is difficult. Oh no, let me rephrase that. Trust is a solid, it's a hard skill, isn't it? Because actually, because you can't be taken advantage of, and that's where the vulnerability comes from. But actually,
Yeah,
you learn, you get scars from being taken advantage of, and that's what vulnerability is all about. But it is something. It's a situational thing that you use, but you have to defend yourself and protect yourself as well, because actually, there are people who will go out there and to try and take advantage of your positive intentions.
absolutely.
And that's what we have to be good at spotting, isn't it?
It is. And so this is the flip side of the model for me is that if I come to a situation where I'm struggling to trust someone,
Mm,
I'm able to start asking myself, where's the gap?
yeah.
Do I think they have my best interest at heart? So is there benevolence? Do I think that they have integrity? Do I think they have ability? What are the rules that govern their behavior? What's the
Mm,
context? So that I can get more curious, or I'm more vulnerable than I'm comfortable being. Is there a way for me to be less vulnerable and give this a try? And so there are levers that we can pull with others to try to build trust with them. There are questions we can ask for ourselves that help us diagnose where the gap
mm.
is and help those other people solve that problem for us.
That makes enormous amount of sense. And I'm guessing there's the intention piece is people who have benevolence and integrity, but maybe lower ability, because that does happen, doesn't it? Because we're all on that sort of journey really around ability, I guess.
We are, and ability is a moving target.
Yeah.
What made a great leader 20 years ago is not the same thing that makes a great leader today.
Yeah. And I guess it's
And
situational between people as well, because you've got someone who has very high ability. Even if you've got medium ability, you'll look low, won't you?
you will. And one of the struggles that leaders run into and that parents run into is allowing others to fail,
Mm,
right? And I used to talk about stepping on a rake with my kids.
mm,
When you step on a rake, it pops up and smacks you in the face.
yeah.
Hurts. And so I would say to my kids, look out, there's a rake. Look out, there's a rake.
Mm,
And I realized that all I was teaching them was, wow, dad knows where all the rakes are.
yeah.
What I wasn't teaching them was how to identify those spots for themselves,
Yeah.
allowing them to step on that rake and then come alongside in a coaching approach and saying, wow, that looked like it hurt.
Yeah.
Were there any signs that we could have seen that told us that was coming? And how do we respond now? Because crap happens, it's how we respond that really matters.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely right. Just a sort of footnote as we draw to a close before get people to find out how to find out more about you. I just wonder if there's any difference in approach for people with neurodiversity type things, OCD, ASD, ADHD, and all the rest, bipolar, actually not bipolar, not going quite so far into the deeper end of psychology, but particularly neurodiversity, because often facial cues are different, brain attention is different. So is the model the
Yeah,
same?
model works the same.
Good.
I apply the model across so many different settings and situations and individuals. And I've worked with a number of people who are technically brilliant,
Mm,
people wise struggle. And they will say to me, you gave me a formula. You've changed my life. I'm now able to build trust with people I couldn't before.
yeah,
And I'm able to communicate my context in a way that makes sense for them. And yeah, I've had a fair amount of experience working with people who are neurodiverse and they find it compelling.
good. I'm pleased to hear that. Because I think
Yeah.
sometimes we categorize people experiencing neurodiversity as being too difficult rather than saying it's just the context which is difficult, which is why I like this word context so much. It's a good word.
Yeah. It is. And it removes it from being a personal attack to one more of saying, hey, there's a situation involved.
Yeah.
And we can work on situations,
Yeah.
and we can give each other feedback. I can learn how to communicate in a way that's effective.
Mm,
And it may mean that I need to be more blunt, or it may need to mean that I need to be more retrospective, use allegories,
mm,
use history as a guide, I can learn how to communicate with someone else if I'm
Mm.
curious.
Yeah. Curiosity, there's the word curiosity, learning. They're all our big watchwords. These things we're talking about a lot. They're very difficult to do, never go out of fashion. Darryl, how can people get hold of you? Where can they find out more about the work that you do? And when are you writing a book?
I've written a book. It's called
Oh,
Building Trust, Exceptional Leadership in an Uncertain World.
it's not on your website.
It should be.
Anyway, carry on. Don't let me get distracted.
And it's available on Amazon. It's available as an ebook. It's available as an audiobook. It goes through, I tried to write it in a way that if I disappeared, what I know wouldn't.
Yeah.
So it's got plenty of stories. It goes through all 10 levers and it talks about how to pull each one. So very practical and applied. I've been told it doesn't suck. And so that's one way that people can learn more. They can also go to the website, trustunlimited.com. There's a blog section there that has articles around a bunch of different topics, trust and parenting, rebuilding trust with the police, a number of topics. And there are other videos there that people can watch. That stuff's all free. And people can reach out to me at Darryl at trustunlimited.com. So DARRYL at trustunlimited.com if they have questions. Trying to make the world a better place, Russell.
You certainly doing that. Look, thank you for spending time today, Darryl. It's been an absolute joy. I've learned so much and I've just bought your book. Sorry about that. I was listening, but I can let you talk about how to contact you at trustunlimited.com. And the book is available on Amazon. It is called, what's it called again?
Building Trust, Exceptional Leadership in an Uncertain World.
Correct. Absolutely right. It is. And it's been an absolute joy to meet you this evening, Darryl. And I really do thank you for your time. And it's been inspirational. So thank you so much.
Thank you, and thanks to your listeners.
You take care.